So my brother and I started collecting Star Trek toys when we were kids in the 70s, and we were getting the Mego dolls, but it was frustrating because we couldn't find them all. And then when the motion picture came out, we got those action figures, and they were frustrating because we couldn't find them all. As much as we love them, and as an adult collector, I have them all, but it's very frustrating over the years collecting Star Trek. But during the Next Generation era, it was a much different story because they started getting much wider distribution. Now, the first line that came out was by Galoob. I'm not going to focus in on Galoob, but they did have the first license to the Next Generation. I thought they were decent action figures, but it was, again, frustrating at the time. This is before the internet. Couldn't get them all. Couldn't find all the aliens. But then, in 1992, it was a game changer. Playmates got the license to Star Trek, and to say it was fantastic was an understatement. Because not only did they have excellent likenesses, the articulation was wonderful. You got a whole bunch of accessories. The package was awesome. Look at that. The Enterprise coming right at you. But they actually made the entire line. Like, you could watch so many episodes of Star Trek and see these action figures. What do you think about the likenesses in this line, Cutie Pie?
They were all good. I remember back then just seeing the ads in magazines, and they had so many of
They did.
these.
They did.
Yeah.
And they had a wonderful way of promoting them. So I don't want to focus in on the entire line of Playmates because for me it was TNG. This I just loved everything in TNG. Ended up collecting the movies like Generations, ended up collecting First Contact and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, but there was nothing as expansive as this line. I mean, look at this Ferengi. It actually comes with a whip type, and you see the phaser has the phaser beam coming out of it.
Yes, the one with Picard had the phaser beam coming out of it too. And but that's a neat idea to do that.
Yeah, totally. This one, I remember getting it, and you got to figure by this time I was grown, and I was kind of frustrated. I had to look at it in the eyes of a child. If I was a kid, I would probably like it better because it's more of a rough and tumble version of Riker. But at the time, I was taking them out of the package and just putting them on a shelf. So this one didn't line up with all the others because he's battle worn.
Right, it's a different Riker, yeah.
The Borg. This is the first time that Star Trek actually started having the aliens and adversaries being a commonality. Because with the previous series, the chase figures, or the harder to find figures, were the aliens. Whereas everyone loves aliens. Gowron, that's a great likeness.
That is a cool looking Klingon. The very standard looking, but also you can tell it's Gowron. Yes.
Worf, again, an action pose. Comes with quite a few weapons.
Yeah, like he's doing a little Klingon growl there.
Deanna Troi, I love it that she has the bag with her, tricorder, pad, computer.
Very good likeness of Troy, and her classic costume too.
This one I absolutely loved. I was so excited when I first got this because I love Romulans. I was kind of frustrated that they did not expand the Romulan lore with the action figures, but I have pointy ear syndrome. Those are some nice pointy ears. Now, this one took me back because as children, we both had $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman dolls. And so this kind of reminded me of that time. Like, you could open up Data's forearm and look at the electronics.
Oh yeah, definitely like $6 Million Man. Yeah, but also the way Data was, where you could open the panel on his arm.
And I think this is one of my favorite friendships in all of Star Trek is the friendship of Geordi and Data. Great likeness. Fantastic. And you see he has his engineering tools with him. Now, during this time period in the early 90s, Playmates was also producing toys that were of scale that you could play with. And to this day, you will see a lot of customers use either the phasers, the tricorders. They did a great job with them. And they would make sounds. It was pretty impressive. I think this is wonderful. The Goddard. We know that Goddard was the man who created the rocket, I believe in upstate New York. Great vehicle here because you were able to put your action figures in this shuttlecraft. This is something that we did not have in other lines of Star Trek action figure collecting. Now, over the years, the battery's worn out in these. You're going to find that with a lot of these 40-year-old toys, but look at that Enterprise. Ended up having quite a few. I look at the collection. I mean, I'm looking at our shelf now. We have the Defiant. We have a Romulan ship. We have they started making a bunch of these, but in 1992 there was a section of the aisle that just had all Star Trek stuff, and I love the brilliant colors on this. They really were popping. Now, because of the popularity, in 1993, they started expanding the line even more so. So you had quite a few to choose from. I mean, look at this. This is absolutely fantastic. And they were advertising coming soon, Deep Space Nine. What a great line of figures. What do you think about this action figure?
I like Sela. That looks good. And I like the way they did the colors, too. It's not exactly like it was on the show.
Yes. Very sharp. Here's your boyfriend.
That's a good Spock doll, too.
And quite a bit of accessories. Even see a computer. If you notice, he has a book there with the IDIC symbol on it. So they put some thought in here. It wasn't just a bunch of random accessories. Lore, Data's evil twin brother. Scotty. So we saw Spock. Now we have Scotty. The curiosity during this time period was, why are we only getting Next Generation figures? Why aren't we getting the original series figures? And that's because of the wonky way that the licensing was held out. Next Generation had a different licensing than the original series. So we wouldn't get original series figures till later. Now, it was at this time in 1993, I remember going to specifically a Kmart near my work. And I would love buying these figures at Kmart. Kmart had an entire aisle of Star Trek. And I love that they went backwards. They said, hey, the collectors will like Geordi in his red uniform from the first season, which we did. Glad to see that. And if you see some figures, they started advertising exclusive collector card, which they either had a card or a pog in it. And then some of them started having this chrome feature to it. Now, one thing I did not mention, which made this really unique, and I remember going to Star Trek conventions, and there would be dealers that would brag about low serial numbers. All the figures had a serial number on the bottom. And I remember going to one convention it was a creation convention in New Haven, Connecticut, and a dealer had an action figure with the number 1701 on it, and he wanted an astronomical price.
Oh, wow. He probably got it, too.
I love how there's a little body armor on here. I don't know if you could see it on film, but it's not super shiny, but it's a different tone of gray, so it looks like body armor instead of just the jumpsuit on her arm and her chest. We've got another version of Deanna Troi with her second season uniform, so you had some variety. Beverly Crusher with her med kit. So we had first season, Will Riker. I like this. He had the same action pose, but his shirt wasn't ripped up. Guinan. This was, during this time period, the ultimate peg warmer. Captain Picard. I remember making a shelf with all Klingons on it. Just putting, because they were starting to make more and more different variations of the Klingons. Different outfits for Klingons. Q, which I was glad they made it. I was actually curious. I think this is from the first season, for the first series. Did in first season episode. This one was unique that they started making some of them. I was frustrated that they didn't make all of them in dress uniform. But I thought it was fantastic that they were thinking outside the box like that. That is a great Ensign Rowe figure. She's one of my favorite characters. I remember it being excited because I used to customize my figures, and I ended up taking the body of another figure and cutting off a Mordock head and make him like the episode where he and Wesley were in competition with one another. But I made him an officer. This has to be one of the best cliffhangers for the summertime in all of Star Trek.
Yes, best of both worlds.
This one ended up being hard to find. This is, once we get to the 7th season, Star Trek was flying high. Everyone was watching Star Trek. And this is Data. You can see it's an error. They said a scene in Redemption. He didn't wear the red uniform in Redemption. They never corrected that, but it's a great looking action figure. We could see they started making other characters or versions of characters you can only see in an episode or two, such as Data as disguised as a Romulan. I was surprised they never made Wesley with that rainbow shirt. Dixon Hill. This was an odd one for me. I ended up cutting the head off of Captain Kirk and making a Gangster Kirk out of that, making my own costume. And up until this time, they kept a consistency with the packaging. Next generation packaging always looked like this. But then they started deviating a little bit as the series went further. We see they updated it. The packaging freshened it up a little bit. And to contrast, look at the packaging of the Deep Space Nine. I think this is one of the prettiest packages, though, is Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Because it looks like the figure's coming out of the wormhole. And by this time, they were making all different packaging. They got the license for the original series. At this time, they didn't call it TOS. They called it Classic Star Trek. So just an example of the difference of the packages. So this is my favorite. Is everything out of TNG. Great likeness of Sarek here.
That's excellent, yeah.
Another one that was harder to find, and this is the one where people started losing their minds because they had a 3-pack where they only made 1,701 of them. So if you were a completist, you couldn't get them all. And oh boy, I remember going to Kmart and I couldn't find that series. It was so hard to find. And during this time period, they started making the big dolls as well. And for each of the big dolls they kept changing the package to them. So if you look at it, you couldn't make a wall and have them all look consistent. Every show and every movie had a different logo to it. So they had them in multiple sizes. And speaking of multiple sizes, this was the deal breaker for me because they kept changing the sizes. I was glad though when by this time when they started making more TOS stuff, they changed the packaging yet again. This was to look like the Delta. But I was very frustrated by this point because now they changed the figures to a different scale. So when you have the figures next to each other on the shelf, look at it. They don't line up. For first contact, they started making them larger. And that was the 1701 fiasco was hard for me. This was a total deal breaker because I wanted to get these and I wanted these outfits in this scale, and I wanted to customize and make my whole line of Deep Space Nine figures, but I gave up. I totally gave up because they weren't keeping true to the scale. They did make these though, Star Trek Academy figures. I started scaling back and just saying I only want Next Generation. I don't want Deep Space Nine. I don't want Voyager. I just wanted everything Next Generation. I thought this was an interesting take. All the characters. I just brought this one out just for to look at the package. And this came with some. You put it in the computer and you get to see some pictures. It was kind of interesting. And they kept changing the packaging again, changing the scale. And end up doing things like this. Then they started getting super novelty. I did not like this. Not only were the figures way too big, but now they were worried about, like, look at the scale compared. Put it like that. Yeah, and then it was, I don't know if this even plays correct. Let's see if this plays. Oh, here it goes.
You can kind of hear it.
But this was this run of Next Generation by far was my favorite period in action figure collecting because of the sheer volume of figures. There was just so much available, and they did a fantastic job with articulation and likeness. Anybody else love the Next Generation Playmates figures? Love to hear from you.